as MC and the moderator, partially, and just get the formalities out of the way. There is an air alert in Kiev. Some Russian drones are probably moving our way, and we have talked with the security. So at the moment there is no serious threat in the air. Whenever the serious possible threat may emerge, we will then proceed to the shelter downstairs. There is a shelter there, but at the moment there is none such. So, does anyone object if we proceed? Not the case. So we'll take the informed risk to keep the discussion going for the time being, and so the participants, anyone who's outside the room, please do come in. While you're taking place, I'm going to tell you how one guy taught me that in Halych, Ukraine, parts of Ukraine, there is a Halician quadrant. If the 15 minutes of waiting are allowed, whenever the 15 minutes expire, the meeting starts, whatever. But we don't follow that tradition. We'll start immediately without waiting for 15 minutes. There'll be more time for refreshments, tea and coffee. On behalf of the organizers of this conference, thanks everyone who came to this conference. The name of our conference is double meaning, from deoccupation to open democratic governance. And we're conducting it as part of the Global Open Government Week, which is still going on. The conference also is part of the legal foundations of institutional recovery of Donbass, facilitated by self-organizing population in partnership with Center of Political Legal Reforms and NGO Luganshina Renaissance and Development, supported by International Renaissance Foundation. Our partners are Congress of Local and Regional Councils or authorities and at the presidential level, and the Ministry of Communities and Infrastructure. So in order to have more of a formal opening, I would like to invite Alexander YAREMA, State Secretary of Cabinet Ministers of Ukraine, co-head of the Coordination Council and Implementation in Ukraine, the Initiative of Partnership, Open Governance or Open Government. So you can take a microphone. Greetings everyone, all the participants of this conference. Thank you so much for the invitation, for the opportunity to get engaged in today's event. Despite the challenges Ukraine at the moment faces, starting from the large-scale invasion, we still don't need to avoid in talking about democratic governance as a value which makes us different from the aggressor state, because implementing values makes the future of our state and our place in the family of European countries. To the extent the situation allows, we continue to drive important initiatives in this area. This week we joined the circle of almost 70 countries in the world partaking in the Open Government initiative, and we are also conducting this National Open Government Week. From May 27 to 31st, the local self-governance, the NGO, civil society, international organizations have scheduled different public events in terms of opening and transparency of governance in different areas, access to information, civil participation, and engaging the youth. Almost 110 events this year as part of the Open Government Week in Ukraine. So everybody is invited to participate in this initiative and the Open Government Initiative. I want to thank our colleagues, the organizers of this conference, to include this conference in this initiative. That demonstrates how important the issues that we discuss in this conference are. Restoring the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country, the occupation and reintegration of temporarily occupied territories is one of the key tasks that Ukraine faces at the moment. It's one of the parts of the peace formula of Ukrainian president. Maybe somebody asked, is it worth talking about democratic governance while the territories are still occupied? Of course, the first and the most difficult task is to liberate the entire Ukrainian territory. At the same time, after the occupation, we will face many challenges still, and we have to be ready to face them. Providing this mechanism in the context of cooperation with the state, NGOs, businesses, international organizations, main priorities of state policy here to restore the state governance, and we need to define certain strategies. That's why the cabinet ministers already created a reserve of the staff to work on the occupied territories. Public service requires people who understand how to work on these territories. That's why the goal of providing reserve, more personnel, necessary personnel that have been created, or to restore the work on the occupied territories to facilitate the functions of the state. So there are now about 1,200 candidates, average age from 22 to 48. Most of them expressed the wish to work in Donetsk, Kherson, Zaporizhia, and the territories after the occupation. It's very important that the candidates have the opportunity to have their priorities, and they define such priorities: administrative governance, state oversight, legal facilitation, prevention of corruption. Reintegration is a very important element of national cohesion and unity, and the legal base restores the Ukrainian authority on those territories as a modern, contemporary European state. So the issues of democratic open governance are part of the plan of recovery, national strategy of facilitating civil society, and in the new plan, implementing initiative open governance for 23-25. Within this action plan and initiatives, the governance and Institute of Civil Society create the system DREAM together for transparent recovery of the country, develop open science, and promote principles of integrity in education, open data formats. Especially, we drive forward the skills of the young people in decision-making, and that is a very important priority, which everywhere is in every state document. Providing democratic governance, including governance on the occupied territories, will facilitate the draft law on public consultancy, also implementing the already existing law on people's democracy. As a local self-governance, they have to join forces with civil society and businesses to solve important challenges that we face. Projects and legal initiatives in open governance, including for the occupied territories, have to be based on intersectoral partnership. That's why these events like today are an important element in joining efforts of all these constituent parts to be able to work together and tackle the challenges we face. I want to thank the Association of Self-Organizing Population, colleagues from the International Renaissance Foundation, other organizers of this event, and I want to wish us all a great and fruitful discussion. Glory to Ukraine. Thank you, Alexander, and you invited Alexander SUSHKO, Executive Director of International Renaissance Foundation, who also support this event. Alexander. Good morning. Greetings to this great audience. There are a lot of familiar faces, and the topic is, although familiar, it is nonetheless difficult. We're talking today about the topic which the Renaissance Foundation has been dealing with for decades, ever since we faced the problem of territories occupied. And ever since, we've gone through many phases of the work on how specifically Ukraine has to do and what should Ukraine has to suggest at certain moment when the situation will allow for restoration of normal democratic governance in occupied territories. We already have seen what challenges Ukraine faces, even in case of territories that were occupied for just a few months. We all remember the story of Kharkiv, Kherson. The problems are still remaining, still unresolved, and they are complex problems. And it's been only several months of occupation. You can only imagine how more profound and how much deeper the problems may be on working with those territories where the occupation lasted for years. And in some places, it's been for several decades. So we as a foundation, we support experts, the state prominent persons and activists and NGOs to clarify the picture, how to approach this problem. What staff should be prepared, what candidates should be found, what proposals and messages we have to address to the people who found themselves in the occupied territories. And that's one of the most difficult problems, because we see certain stories of legislation that somehow introduces criminal liability for something like collaboration, because which is challenges, because no country has ever faced the problem in such scale and in such formats. So there's no template solution to resolve it. So this is one of the most unprecedented problems, because we don't have a positive body of experience or body of positive experience to tap into to find a solution. So we need to basically invent from scratch the potential solutions that can potentially be effective whenever the time for that comes. I'm very thankful to the experts who have worked and still working on this topic here in Kiev and down in the regions. We keep bringing together with the government, with the parliament, with the civil society organizations, with think tanks who work on this topic, and the fact that we even in not so positive picture on the front lines, but we continue to do it, that means we keep the faith and trust in restoring the state, and Ukraine will return on its sovereign territories, and the people who are awaiting this over there. Thank you, and have a great discussion throughout the day. So, without further ado to our discussion, the first topic that is scheduled is state policy and the vision of institutional recovery of the territories after the occupation. I invite our four panelists: Alexander Kornienko, First Deputy Head of the Parliament; Irina Vereshchuk, Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine and the Minister of Reintegration of Temporarily Occupied Territories of Ukraine; Daria Morchak, the First Deputy Minister of Social Policy; and Natalia Kozlovska, Deputy Minister of Development of Communities and Infrastructure of Ukraine. Not at the moment. Well, she will join in later. As the ancient Latins say, those who are absent, let it be their own worry. So the main issue have already been mentioned, that each such conversation starts with. Greetings to everyone who joined in. So why is it now, at the time where we daily, sadly, lose a little bit by bit of Ukrainian territories, why are we here talking about recovery of those territories and institutional recovery after deoccupation. Well, the most obvious answer to this question, it's not yet the time. Let's first get the territories back, and then we'll think how to deal with them later. But at the tip of our fingers, it's understood that talking about the occupation and the well-being of our lands after the recovery, you have to start now. You have to have plan A, B, and even better, plan C. So I want to start with a short question. Why is it necessary to talk about it now? When the situation on the front line is difficult. Let's start with Alexander. Good morning. Thank you for the invitation. You know, I'm maybe an experienced speaker on events dedicated to candidate selection for staffing, the state projects, the NGO-based projects. And we always start from the very beginnings, and the good question, with a simple answer. Ukraine always had and is and will be returning to its own people, to its lands, to reclaim their people, our people and policy and territories. This is not just our state policy, it's the essence of our state. So regardless of any possible terms that may look at the moment very difficult, we talk about Crimea, Lugansk and Donetsk have been occupied for more than 10 years. Zaporizhia, part of the region is almost 2 years. Parts of Kherson region, but that will be made sooner or later by Ukrainian state. It's whichever term of the government or parliament, is it 8th government or 10th government, it's unimportant. The important is that it's going to happen. So that's why we have to keep it in the focus, so that later quickly get these territories back, not only territories and people, not only technically and legally, but mentally also, management-wise, economy-wise, socio-cultural-wise, demographics. So there are a lot of dimensions to this problem. So good governance is a great topic because it's a topic of applying resources, because good governance, it's about any of these issues that I mentioned, the demographics, economy, state policy, or territorial development, agriculture, etc. So I think we have to talk about it. We do have to talk about it. We do have to prepare the staff, the necessary people, and whenever the time comes and we will return to those territories, we'll already have a team that will be effective in achieving that. So that was the position of the parliament. What's the executive power says? Yeah, thank you. We will be talking about what's already done, because we have to have results. And if I answer directly your question, why now? What are we fighting then for? What are our men and women in the trenches fighting for? Part of them will be wounded. How do you explain to them what are they fighting for? They're fighting for our people, including people in the temporary occupied territories. They are fighting for 6 million people who are there right now. It's 1 million children. We have to understand it. It's our young who are waiting, who are our seniors who cannot leave. They cannot tackle this way, the only way through Kolotylivka Pokrovka, and we're also fighting for them. So Mr. Lysakon here, head of the Lugansk administration, he will tell you what we're fighting for. Over there, there is temporary occupation right now, but people, for instance, rectors, university teams, healthcare establishments, businesses who relocated, some of them have become IDP twice, but they still want to go back to Lugansk region. They want to restore Lugansk region. They are asking to help them now, not tomorrow, not when the territory will be deoccupied. They have different problems, and they have them right now. For instance, the businesses who do internet sales, Nova Pochta doesn't accept them. They say, when you need to re-register. Let's forget about Lugansk. You register somewhere here in Kiev, and that's going to happen. So I'm not saying Nova Pochta is doing something bad. I'm just one of the examples. So relocated universities. Let's join you with someone. Why do we need Lugansk State University? Because it will be about science. I'm on the side of the regions, Lugansk, Kherson. We will get back there, we know, and we'll do everything for that. We have the draft strategy already, which is going through external approval. So there are people here who were party to the signing of this document. There are experts, there are work groups. It's a huge amount of work. We've been writing this for a year, but it's a new strategy, and it's based on practical experience, specifically what Alexander said as examples of Kharkiv, Kherson, the occupation, and the problems that are related to restoring the authorities. There are no levels, local, regional, how we're going to be restoring the electronic keys, when the elections will be, if and how they will be, etc., etc.
The strategy will be adopted by the end of June, and there is a clear plan for implementation of the strategy, and it clearly defines which ministry is responsible for what. Ministry of Social Policy, Ministry of Education and Science, Ministry of Health. By the way, I would like to thank the Ministry of Health. They already have their own concept. The Ministry of Education and Science have already sent the concept for the approval. Tamila Tasheva, if there is the office of the president in Crimea, this component of the strategy is being improved, and there is the resolution that's going to be approved in the nearest future. So we are already working on all those matters that need to be tackled today, not tomorrow. Yes, there is the transition justice, and we know that we will have to approach this. Minister of Justice is waiting, and that's an incredibly important job, and I'm grateful to our donors and organizers of this event if you help the Minister of Justice, because it's about the property rights, it's about recovery. So these are millions of the decisions of the courts. We always argue which term to use, because we are to kick out the Russians who illegally cross the border with Ukraine. They must be kicked out in the framework of the international laws and conventions. Nobody's going to, deliver them out in the wagons, deporting, but they will be kicked out. They must understand this, and they have to prepare for this. They must do it now, leaving our territories, rather than we will do it in the forced way. And we are discussing all of these matters at our daily meetings. A weekly meeting on the deoccupied territories. Thank you all colleagues who are joining in. A weekly meeting on the occupied territories, because there is a mass of problems with documents and everything that the person can face that is in the temporarily occupied territories and who wants to move. So this is all from me, and I would like to thank you, dear colleagues, one more time. Please don't listen to those who are telling us that we must do all of this after the occupation. No, we are to do it now, during the times when our soldiers, boys and girls, are fighting for our land, who are fighting for our country. Thank you. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Vadim. I would like to go back to 2022 right now, and I would like to remind you that thanks to our armed forces of Ukraine, we already had the deoccupied territories, and that's a Kyiv, Chernihiv, Kharkiv, Sumsky region. And what Alexander Kornienko said, we have to clearly understand that we are ready. That next day after the occupation, people return to their homes. And the great part of people go back to their homes despite the state they are in. And despite the territories are not demined and that the safety situation is not 100% guaranteed, but people are going back home. So there is no question why we are discussing this at the moment. We are discussing this in order to, when the time comes, the time that we felt already in 2022, we ought to be ready. We are to be prepped. We are to know how we are to provide the safety situation for people, to provide the infrastructure, social conditions, the primary administrative services provision that are necessary right away after people return. And this is the question of the preparation that you and us can discuss in detail and find out what can go wrong. Maybe something needs to be revisited or done, so that the steps, both on the state level and on the local levels, are implemented and they are well thought and well structured, so that the moment the people return to their homes, they have the understanding that Ukraine is present on these territories and that Ukraine is capable to provide them with all the range of services they need and to provide them with the necessary infrastructure that is necessary there. And these matters are vitally important, and they daily require our response, what, how, and in what way. And here I would like to express gratitude to the local governments, local authorities who play the most important role in these times. They are the chain of providing answers to all people on the site. So, but then indeed, this discussion is really much necessary, and it helps all the parties to understand in what way we all have to act. Thank you. Thank you. Did Madam Irina want to add something? Yeah, thank you, Madam Natalia, for touching upon the subject, because yesterday we had the meeting about accommodation for our people from occupied territories, including those who are forced to leave now, looking for the shelter either abroad or in Ukraine, but definitely not in those conditions they used to live, for example, in Mariupol before occupation. And you weren't there yesterday, so I would like to kindly ask you now, because the mayor of Mariupol, said that unfortunately people from the temporarily occupied territories cannot be entered into the register of the damaged and ruined property, and they are very bothered by this. They at least ask for the fact of registration that their property was destroyed or damaged. And there's a good example of an experimental project on Zaporizhia region, and that and only 2 households got the compensation. So the path is taken, but unfortunately still closed for many. So please, Natalia, take a look at the requests of people so that they have the chance at least 10 years later or 15 years later, to get compensation, so that they understand that they will not be forgotten, that they are part of these processes, because right now they're not. And another thing that was discussed yesterday, and I should mention it now, that people are very anxious that those compensations that we pay them, that's only for 1 year, it's a 12 months compensation. Those people who are leaving now Kharkiv and become IDPs because of the active hostilities, and people leave Donetsk region as well, they are afraid that they will not be able to use it, and they ask to, prolong this term. Okay, I would like us to go back to the topic because we speak about the institutional recovery. And you, Madam Irina, said that until the end of June there will be the concept, the voting for concept, and it will be already approved. But tell us, please, will it concern all of the occupied territories now? And I'm going to explain why I clarify this, because before 2022 we know that there was one story about Donetsk and Luhansk being occupied, and there was another process for reintegration. But Crimea, that didn't suffer the hostilities to full extent, there will be another scenario. That's why the Crimean platform was created by the president, because it could be regulated somehow by the political field. But now, right after the strikes, in Crimea. We cannot say that Crimea doesn't suffer this hostilities. So this strategy, does it envisage the same approaches to all occupied territories, or do you differentiate the institutional recovery? Well, we have the same approach, similar approach for all territories, because we understand that it's important. Crimea was in the brackets because there was no military decision. Only after Zelensky came into power, the political discussion recovered. And as for Donetsk and Luhansk, we did have the strategy of economic reintegration. There was nothing but Crimea. So now we include both Crimea, Luhansk region, and Donetsk region, and the newly occupied, temporarily occupied territories. But we understand that the approaches will have to be adjusted anyway. So there's a general strategy in place and the general plan, but there will be a separate sub-plan, so to say, concerning each of the regions, oblasts. Because we understand that there's a difference between Zaporizhia Oblast approach and Crimea, for example. Okay, Oleksandr. By the way, we have a gender balance right now on the stage. As for the work of the parliament, I'm curious. What is the vision of the legislator? Because the things about the strategy told by Irina, it envisages lots of legislative acts. So the cabinet of ministers will have their secondary legislation, but you will play the main part. And question one, for me, as a journalist with big experience, when I hear discussions of the topic of reintegration in any company, the conversation starts with elections, local elections. We thought that the decentralization reform was the most successful one, right? And Natalia tells that nothing has changed. So there are grounds to think that this will keep on being this way. But decentralization, this is about local elections. And on the newly deoccupied territories, it's a game with so many unknown indicators that is considered in the following way, that maybe there must be the moratorium for elections and then we'll see. Is this topic discussed in the parliament? Because it will depend upon the parliament. Are there any conversations in the parliament on this account? I will continue your thought. Yes, all talk starts with the talks about the local elections, and actually everything is to end in it. Elections is not the first thing we need to think about. And the conversation is not only the basis of our parliament, but it's one of the topics and components of our 3-year big program with the Council of Europe that we are exercising based on the basis of the parliament, and these are Strasbourg dialogues, so-called. And the Council of Europe is the key body and benchmark on human rights. And clearly, they are also concerned so that we didn't attack human rights in this or that way via martial law, deoccupation, occupation, reintegration, and the partners see their big contribution to these processes. There are a few moments that must be explained as for the legislative regulation of all these matters. If we speak about the upgraded strategy, and if there are also legislative acts based on it, of course we will work on it, we will adopt them. And last year we have mandated the government to develop the map for the amalgamated communities, and they did. And it will be presented by the time of the next Crimean platform. And so that's partly the cognitive war, right? Because clearly that the enemy reflects upon this a lot, that we have and the Crimean Tatar population that we have renamed the points, have some communities. So everything that the enemies reflect upon must be done for the maximum, because they are not shy to do so. Just open the phone and, you know, there is a constant, like, psychological manipulations. But I should also speak about maybe bringing everything into order in this field first, because part of our temporarily occupied territories are regulated by the legislation about the VZA, and it's like, you know, the blanket that consists of little parts. First they would adopt something, then something would be added, and it looks very heavy to operate it. We have to have a unified approach. I think that we have to move to the transition or after war, or the transition period, you know, military and civil administrations that would have more connection with the communities, and the inclusive tools would have to be used, because until we can hold elections, we have to at least have to provide the quasi-electoral democracy. These are public councils. So all of those that are to be in operation during this transitional period, given that in this or that form, we will apply transition justice, and there must be also the transition democracy. That's the point. And this will prepare the local authorities, the appointed ones, to more openness and accountability, and this will also be the preparation for the local community, because let's not forget that the biggest challenge will be connected with the type of people who will be there, like how many passports they have, what's in their head, what's in their passport. This is a big, serious matter that will have to be tackled. On the other hand, we have also the understanding there will be not many people there. So when you know that there are not many people and you don't know who can be your foundation, so we have to build up the pro-Ukrainian community. And here we speak about increasing the presence of the moment of the return of Ukrainian authorities, the NGOs and media, and we will seek assistance from our partners so that the projects that were launched as of 2015, 2016, and that worked in the Ukrainian part of Donetsk and Luhansk region. In Kramatorsk, remember having some hubs in Mariupol. The NGO movement was there much better, even in Kiev sometime. So all of this must be rebuilt, and it has to be enhanced by the civil society. And of course, the state will create the stimulant in order to go back to business. So there will be some, free economic trade area or special tax mode in order to stimulate, incentivize the rapid recovery of business there. And that's part of bigger discussion, what has to be built there or recovered, either industry or to start anew, or what to do with the militarization of facilities and lands, also demining or just pollution with the explosives. That is also a big challenge there. And the parliament is to work on all these directions. And indeed, the enemy gives us the legislative pause, so to say. And we can focus on unifying or developing the new legislation and add it to our general framework. Well, unfortunately, the Constitution cannot be amended now, but also some things are worth amendment in the Constitution as well. There's going to be a big discussion about Crimea and its status. Do you mean autonomous nature? These are two different discussions. One of them is not a discussion. Which one? Well, speaking about the cultural autonomy of the Crimean Tatar people, we have to move in this direction, I think. We have already created the bill about the indigenous population, and it got good feedback from the Council of Europe as a special extra regulation for certain national communities. And this is very important because there is the manipulation of the topic of the national communities, and we have the example when we give even more rights and guarantees to our indigenous people. And I think in the further dialogue with the Crimean Tatars, will have more things to do that are of their interest. And the status of the Crimea as the administrative unit is something that is to be discussed, because we remember when the Autonomous Republic was born and which prerequisites we had back then. So we are to take careful thinking how to manage all this. At the moment, we are to fulfill the Constitution, and in the Constitution it says the Autonomous Republic of Crimea. But I do expect the discussion in the society sooner or later, and then it will be shaped into the you already gave us a very interesting insights. Well, this is not the first time that we are discussing this. And Daria joins us. Daria, thank you for joining in. And because your chair was empty, she's the first deputy of the Minister of Social Policy of Ukraine. But now we have gender imbalance. But there is next to us, there's a room on gender component. So. So just to finalize, I still have a few words. So summing up, the Parliament is open and ready to work. We have the special committee. We have 3 committees that are to work on these matters. We have the Committee on the Deoccupation and Reintegration. We have the Committee for State Building and the Committee for State Policy. So the transition justice is the matter of the law policy, and Council of Europe is ready to support us in this. And of course, they will give us their expert opinions, and we must take it into consideration during the we have all of the transition temporarily stories, and we have to connect it to getting the membership in the EU, so that it doesn't pose any questions. Maybe someday, when there's a favorable safety situation and social cultural atmosphere, then maybe we can hold elections. And of course, as legislator, us and our colleagues, they will probably set some timeline for postponing, because you cannot say that you will never have elections, but we can say we need 7 years until we can have elections, or 2 electoral cycles, and then to work on trying to have a full reintegration by means of the good quality state governance. And when it's already to the point, to move to the electoral democracy. Thank you.
Great. So when I asked Alexander about elections, he said that the elections sometimes end. But the question is, what do you begin with? Maybe the most obvious answer that everyone says that you have to start with everything, but strategy requires prioritized action. So one wise person says, if you have more than 3 priorities, you don't have priorities. So Natalia, what do you say? What 3 main priorities that have to be in the focus when we will be thinking about institutional recovery of territories of the occupation? What are the 3 priority things? Thank you. So yeah, if we talk about recovering democracy and the rule of law in those territories, these are super important issues, and they say that they show that we understand how to move forward. But what Alexander said, if we talk about these key aspects, can we provide democracy of this process and a quality of this process? We cannot just copy Russia doing something without understanding how, what, and with whom, and understanding whom we work with. So talking about elections in those territories is only possible when we will be confident that we will provide quality. One more time, going back to the issue that I mentioned before, that people, when they come back to the occupied parts, to their homes and their residential areas, they understand that they want to have their minimal needs met. You understand whether the electricity is there, the roads are there, healthcare is there. If the main industry is destroyed, that is the main employer for everyone in that community, what do you have to do? Where will people find jobs? What do you do with the social part, education? Because people go back with children. Good example, Makarev city in Kiev, where all the kindergartens were destroyed completely, but all the residents returned, and they're ready to go to work. But they don't understand where do they get the children to school? So that's what I'm talking about, and that's what Irina said. And it's about every residential area. It's very individual, depending on what's the situation in that area. If it's completely destroyed, then we understand what has to be done. If a certain category of facilities have been destroyed, like the kindergartens, you have to then focus and provide for economically active people to be able to make a living and help them with that, because they need to have something for their children. So it's two parts in this question. General political, restoring the democracy is the key issue, and the practical daily things in life that people need. So last year, the government had instituted these recovery programs for each community. The local self-governments have to analyze in what situation their residential area is, what's with the people, with the demographics, how many died, how many returned, what's with the damage structure, what has to be the main focus. So if all the fields are mined and people don't understand how agricultural community can really make ends meet for the residents, they have to refocus their activity in order to provide jobs to the people. And so thanks to the necessary changes in the law, together with a huge number of donors who are helping the local self-governance to build these programs, now we have an understanding of practical steps that have to be done by each territorial community locally to provide all the specter of necessary things and strategies that have to be done in each area. So we are trying to make this a synergy, practical steps to restore the facilities and democracy. Thank you. So that is a great segue to Darina's issue, because social policy is a very important thing for recovery, to whether the people will return or will not. So Darina, in terms of your ministry, what has to be the main focus when we're trying to restore institutionally the deoccupied territories, for the social justice that is declared in the Constitution is maintained? So your version of 3 priorities. So the first priority is to understand where we'll be able to at all restore the life of people, if not to the full-fledged restoration, but at least enough basic infrastructure, because at the moment, unfortunately, we understand that not all the residential areas are going to be fit for resettling back soon. So what we're doing for a while is preparing the deoccupation plans, so where we split the social parts into several parts. First is in terms of priorities and in terms of zoning or regioning. If we talk about regioning, we understand that there will be residential areas where maybe there is no reason to return at the moment. And before the recovery that Natalia was basically mentioning, there's no need to deploy social infrastructure immediately. What to do in these regions is to provide the basic needs of the people, and we have to deploy multidisciplinary team in those regions, mobile brigades. What are we talking about? We know that often the residential areas that are on the front line The most vulnerable people, unfortunately, don't leave. People with disabilities, the elderly, etc. So for us, the priority is to understand in each residential area what is the number of those people. How many of them are capable of tending to themselves? How many are not capable? So in order to make this sort of audit of each community that will be deoccupied, we're designing these programs together with regional administrations. So those are basically mobile brigades where there will be social workers, there will be medical workers. They'll be analyzing what is the medical and social assistance needed to those people, providing to them humanitarian support, and basically covering the most urgent needs. Second is what Natalia mentioned, is that there are people who stayed in the community which had through active warfare or occupation. Often they don't have means for existence. So second important thing is to restore the ability of people to fund their basic needs, to have them met. So that's where we have very important part, restoring infrastructure, banking and pension fund, and assistance in financial payments. But obviously we will face the problem, especially when it's about temporarily occupied territories, is the problem of documents, lost documents, destroyed documents. If it's about territories that were occupied from the year 14, is the question that many of the people may have no Ukrainian documents whatsoever. Or imagine the situation that the person as of the year 14 was still employed. Right now it's already a pensioner. But as a state, we don't have any information about their work experience, any proof of documents, whether that person was not a active agent against the Ukrainian armed forces. So we have a number of issues in terms of documentation and confirming or recognizing how we as a state can interact with that person and what is the amount of social support that has to be provided. So we do work on these issues, but it's important to know, and in parallel, of course, depending on the Ministry of Justice and State Migration Service are working on this. We are also designing our programs of the sort of universal assistance to those people who will need that on the initial stage of recovery. And of course, the third is a systemic block in this general list of tasks. And it's the rebuilding the institutions in particular social support. We're talking about pension funds, social workers, but unfortunately we also have huge challenges there because we have a serious lack of employees. So a lot of citizens who were in the social support, they were in occupied territories or have moved abroad. So we have this understaffing. So digitizing the workforce reserve, we have some draft legislation in the pipeline. So we want to build this capacity to understand what regions in Ukraine can be donors of workforce who will be able to rescue the understaffing problem as a minimal comfortable level for work. So these three priorities in terms of urgency and the way we work. So you basically approached a very problematic thing, the staffing. We have Ukrainian businesses who say 75% of the businesses cannot find qualified staff for positions, for jobs. I know that the public sector situation is even worse. We have a serious lack of workforce, and you said there will be multitasking teams providing social protection. So these people have to be there. They have to be professionals, which leads us to the question of, as both Alexander and Irina was asking, maybe wrong, but correct me if I'm. So the incentives themselves for people to go to the occupied territory is not enough. So if we talk about institutional recovery, maybe there are some institutional changes necessary. So we already mentioned some problematic issue, talking about military civil administrations. Are they executive power, local authorities? Are they paramilitary? Who are they specifically? So mono-military, so to say. So how do you see the resolution of this systemic problem? Not just the one-off solutions of we increase the salary for those who come back, but the systemic. Just a couple of words, maybe Irina will have more practical view on this. So to increase salary, it's a systemic thing. Because even in the 3 or 4 occupied regions, we're talking about dozens of billions of hryvnias. So as part of the EU accession, we do run a public governance reform. It's one of the conditions for Ukraine facility. It's draft law 8222. So it's being done experimentally within the budget, but up to first quarter of 2025 we have to adapt this law and fully implement the system. So the system is basically more fair for the average level workers, so heads of departments. It so happened there will be less salary. So if some of you are heads of departments, but specialists, line specialists will have more salary. So this grading system that we're implementing is important because it has to be tied to the labor market. If a person is working on a similar position in business, they would have to be remunerated on par, because otherwise it's just total years of service, and then they have to survive somehow. You gotta understand that in Ukraine, if we talk about stimuli, we have the most very interesting system of, because we have a separate service in local self-governance, banking, law enforcement. There are police officers. Who are they? They are public servants, but a certain separate status they have, seems to be. So it all requires sufficient work, not only on the payment, but also stimuli. So when we talk about HR, when we talk about reserves, we have to provide stimuli. Because people are moving back in an atmosphere which is, so to say, not very conducive to normal work. Even those who are serving there right now, it's still post-Soviet, so filtration, and the enemy, unfortunately, is not likely to go anywhere for a while now, and they will create these problems like collaboration with the enemy, etc. So it's always challenges for line workers, for heads of departments, for the governance. So we have to strengthen different National Guard and police and law enforcement, or part of their mandate and state security functions, critical infrastructure, etc. Because there will be cyber attacks. There will be. We've seen already that they try and target TV towers. For some reason, it's important for them. So we have to work on that, of course, and we will need assistance from the partners, of course, in doing this, because Ukraine alone will not be able to all the time, formally and practically, to facilitate. There will have to be on these big conferences on Ukraine recovery in Lugano and Berlin and London, it has to, the public administration has to be part of the agenda, because it's been discussed, but somewhere on the small discussions on green economy and green hydrogen, etc. But without governance, you won't have any hydrogen. So that's the way to work together. So one thing to clarify, I've heard that those who will agree to work on the occupied territories, they will have bigger salary than those who already are employed over there. So if you go to the nuclear power station, you can count on a higher salary, because it's a much needed position. The state, as a responsible employer, has to compensate the risks for a person. If a person is living in Lviv, it's one level of risk. In Dnipro, it's another. And in Konstantinivka, it's been hit more and more. So I have a clear understanding of the scope of problem when I visit Pokrovsk. I have people there that I visit often, or Grodivka. I understand that a public servant right now, it's a heroic deed being a public servant. So it was a difficult hit on Mykolaiv administration, and we spoke with the MPs with the suggestion that state the electricians, the utilities workers, we should equalize them to the battle victims on the battlefield, and the state will have to compensate them whenever we will have the ability, because these people are working on their workplace and they're serving the state. I agree with Alexander, and I agree, and I will add that we already have the executive order to have the remuneration salary. So if it's active warfare zone 2, ratio 2, if possibility of warfare 1.2. So in Kharkiv, their district administrations have contacted us. They asked us to add some additional subsidies from state budget, because they have to cover that difference. And the Ministry of Finance has agreed, so their executive order has been published, and the state will be helping the regions, and that ratio 2 and 1.5 will be facilitated, because people have to be paid more. The same for Lugansk, Donetsk, and other similar territories. Now, as for the military civil administration is indeed an effective tool, I think it is, and I think it's the only one right now that can be effective. We see in Kharkiv, the occupied regions, we see all the problems where there's not enough.
And when the head hasn't been appointed right fast, and this was also a question. But I had a question, whether or not, I mean, what is the legal status? So this is the blanket Oleksandr was talking about, that requires now some work. And because there were years when it only worked on part of the territory of Luhansk and Donetsk region, it didn't work at all when we speak about Crimea, because we only have the prosecution office of Crimea and the representative office, but there are no powers. And we are trying to change this, and thank God there's already a bill. And Alexander was leading this process, and today we have the resolution in place, and quite soon there will be the new authority So there will be the Crimean, the military civilian administration, yes, with all set of the positions, and there is the program. I would like to thank the University of after Shevchenko. They prepare the category A work. After the occupation, the team of people will enter right away and they will work. We will not wait for a second. So we learn from our mistakes, we understand what doesn't work, and we try to make it work. We know that there are still questions when there are communities. So there is the civil community and the civil military administration. Yes, it's not easy. We understand the problematics. When we hear the signal, for example, Kharkiv Oblast is now in our focus because they seek our assistance, that request the subvention, the resolution, and we act upon this. You know that there is the military administration of Kharkiv, the regional administration of Kharkiv, we all cooperate together. So we have the stabilization measures plan, the one that will be valid for the first month after we enter. And that's what the Ministry of the Interior have their own plans, and they have presented it. Of course, it's a close one, but we have the understanding what each one of them will do, like the defense forces, the law enforcement agency. We know which is the role for all of them. We prepare for the occupation. And the military civil administrations will also play an important role here. Yes, and also our veterans. So my question, whether or not you will define their status. Yes, of course. We go back to the discussion that I mentioned. There is the civil administration that is envisaged by the Constitution. The Oblast regional, by the way, after decentralization reform, they will look a bit different. Second, the intermediary administration. If to simplify, they prepare this territory for democratic state, and this is the intermediary form between the civil, the military, and the military civilian, and it doesn't exist yet. We have to establish it because it is to have the signs of the military, electoral, civilian, with inclusivity. But we also have one more untackled issue. It was the status of the local people's deputy status in Luhansk and Donetsk region. There are still acting people's deputies, and a lot of money is spent on them, on these oblast councils. But this bill is going to streamline this, and they will seize their powers, because you know, part of them are not just haven't sold to Russians; they are already pro-Russian politicians, you know, and that's. You know, they already stand for election in the Russian Federation, even. Okay, and clearly, all this is about money. We lack Ministry of Finance here, indeed. They would also tell us a few remarks. And we have to understand whether we preserve the mechanism of full subsidizing or not. Because right now they say we need 1 billion hryvnias a year. We give it to them. So in this work, the local authorities will always have less stimuli to create working places, business, and we also, one of the forms of this transition administration will lie in having the budgetary powers as the community, but they will not be electoral. But then they will be more interested in making their own money. And this will be more something that needs to be tackled, because Ministry of Finance will always have their own vision in this area. So you see that we are to look at the situation under different angles, and a separate thing is the property. What is on the balance of the communities, of the military, civil administration, regions? We have to understand all of this, because we have decentralization in our country. 70, 80, 100% of properties has to go downwards. We are to have some oblast cultural establishment, maybe, or the lyceum. And then there must be the territorial interaction between communities, and it must be their burden. So the perfect picture, the oblast budget is not to be overloaded. But somehow we have a bit different situation now that communities have the smallest amounts and the civil administrations have more. So there are like 3 stages of the transition, and on each of the levels these transitions must be covered to make it, to beautify this transition. Allow me one more sentence. I am from the local government, and I think that decentralization and the decentralization reform, that was a good thing that has been done, and I think this is the right path. But on the deoccupied territories, during that transition period, I root for a clear managerial government vertical. We are to preserve resilience, and we see how important it is to have the centralized, managed system when the decisions are made fast, when there is a possibility to influence the decision, when we can make the decision, and the oblast military administration will confirm this. For some time, I understand that then we will have to go to the democratic principles, and I vote for it. Of course, I see the mayor of Mariupol here, Mr. Vadim. I know how much you do and how important it is, but also it's more important to have a state-managed vertical, when you clearly know who you call to and in what way and how this will be tackled. We will have to do this, and I really count on our veterans, military servicemen who will be demobilized and return to their communities. I know how prepared and ready they are, and they are physically and mentally are ready to work there in their communities. And I hope that we all understand this, because we will need the distinct, clear, straightforward professional people who are ready to do, who are stress resilient, because the occupied territories are to be manageable in all senses of this word. Okay, thank you, Natalia. Natalia, did you want to add? Yes. If we, in order to make it all work, I think we ought to take also to give attention to the quality. Alexander Kornienko, Alexander Yaremko spoke about the manpower reserves. So those people who have opportunities and who are capable, they have to be institutionally prepared. And the preparation of these people tells us that when they are on the side, they will know what they are to do today, tomorrow, because it's good when the person is willing to, but it's even better when the person is prepared and understands what, how, in what, steps, and if they have some misunderstanding, they will know who to go to and to get a quality response. And this will enable us understanding that everything works and that we didn't just prepare the manpower reserves, but it's actually capable to fulfill the function we expect from them. Because if the servicemen or military, the National Guard, the Minister of Interior definitely ready, then the specialists that we prepare as the manpower reserves, they are to have the understanding what they are to do. And as for the other directions, that's what Darina mentioned about the social sphere, banking sphere, employees, the construction sphere. All of these things are to be shaped up, on the side. And when we understand that we go to the practical implementation of all these things that we are now discussing, that for us to be ready to work in each of these directions. Thank you. And before I give floor to Daria, the good tradition is of us to also engage the participants of the conference. So while Daria is going to be delivering her speech, please prepare your questions, because I see that there are questions in the room. Maybe you want to reflect upon the things you heard from our speakers. Please, Daria. Natalia, took us back to the discussion of the manpower reserves, and I think us as a society were not thinking about another important thing. We started speaking a lot about the staff deficit, saying that we have issues with filling out the vacancies in the labor market, and Forbes has written about this. But it seems to me that we're still not tackling like how we're going to fix this. I work with the vulnerable categories of the population, and such potential for labor market that we have inside of Ukraine today is hard even to imagine. We have 4.9 million of IDPs, and 3.5 million out of those are displaced after the full-scale invasion, and February 2024, out of them are 700,000 of IDPs who could work. They didn't work. Why didn't they? Because there's this basic problem that is observed everywhere, and that is the skills that these people have and the skills that are necessary in this community do not match. So the supply and demand doesn't match. And the same refers to people with disabilities. And according to our evaluation, we have 1 million persons with disabilities, and they are the potential for employment. They are your future possible employees. And even worse situation is with persons aged 55 plus, those who are closer to the retirement, and we all realize how hard it is for them to be employed in Ukraine today. We speak about the deficit in the labor market, but we have to understand that this is our responsibility of us as the society, as the either employer or employee of each institution, how we're going to tackle this deficit. We can just sit and wait until the perfect candidate comes to us, or we can, being aware, hold the position that we're all investing in our own intellectual staff resource inside of our country. These are the requalification programs, retraining, not only hard skills, but it's also about soft skills, because many IDPs, IDPs moved from the eastern Ukraine to the western Ukraine, and quite often they psychologically, culturally cannot find themselves in the new communities. That's why, on the one hand, this is the problem, but on the other hand, the solution is obvious. We have to, start paying attention to it and start working on it via good quality programs for retraining, requalification, reskilling of those people who now live in your communities and who cannot find work. Thank you. We will do it in turn. Andrei Krupnik, the Institute of Social Technology, this is the public organization, the Institute for Public Service and Management, it's goes after National Academy of Governance. That, by the way, doesn't exist now as the system, and it seems to me that we have to pay attention. If we want to have a centralized solution for preparation of the civil servants, we have to do it via the institutes of the social service. Dnipro, Kharkiv, Odessa, Kyiv. There must be a comprehensive approach. But I want to speak about the public component. For the past 2 years, we have been working with the IDPs. From your speeches, dear colleagues, I didn't hear a word about culture. So people return not to the construction site and not to the military unit. They want to go back home with their own traditions, culture, communication with those who live there, who stay there. So that's why a big request, Irina Andreevna, the resolution 812, it regulates the composition and activity of the councils, IDP's councils. Another resolution makes the amendments, but there is no representative of the Department of Culture in this council. So Oleksandr already said this. The cultural component, the cultural information component, our ministry is what? The Ministry of Culture and Information. So I root for us, tackling these important matters as well. Okay, but you paid attention that I also said that we must make it possible for NGOs to go back there. Yes, it's not about only business or authorities, clearly. But it's going to be a bit difficult with culture because of the objective reasons. Thank you. Oh, so this was not a question, it was just a remark, a reflection. Okay. Good day. Oleksandr, Irina, Darina, Vadim. I have a reflection what I heard. Two main problems that we feel today. I'm the city mayor of Mariupol, and I want to draw your attention to two things. That are especially painful today on in the cities of the occupied and occupied territories. And first thing that we're facing is the preparation of the manpower and their quality. You know, when we even transfer some information that has been prepared by Mariupol, like mission, vision, we don't see the echo because people are not ready to accept this information. They must be prepared for this. So we have the suggestion to create something like the recovery school or school of recovery that we are now discussing with Irina Andreevna. That must be a short course, because people must be prepared to be able to accept this information. And second, what the USA did during the Second World War is also very important. There is a very respected Henry man who created the progressive system of payment of labor grading. Together with the Polish, I have studied this and then implemented it on the territory of Ukraine, and that is in relation to the labor market. And then we will have not such questions like how much must be dedicated to this or that position, because there is an assessment of the position, and it depends upon the region, impact, and so on. So the preparation, the impact on the budget. If we implement this, this will eliminate lots of questions. There is a proposal. The bill you spoke about, it, 8222, it's very important, but we want it to be based on the experience that exists in the world. It's implemented in Poland, in Great Britain, in the USA, so we have to borrow the best practices and implement them. They already did this, and I suggest we do it as well. Thank you, Vadim. Now this block. Anna Linikova, Bakhmut City, organization, Mother 86. I would like to add and say that it's not just about culture, but we didn't hear about the returning Ukraine, not just Donetsk or Luhansk region, because you know we did manage to get it back until 2022, and now it will be even more difficult to do it. And on this account, I have a question: whether or not you researched or studied or analyzed how many people's deputies are the collaborants, or how many officials, state officials, who began working with the occupation regime, and what do we do with these people? Because the bill on the collaborators is not in place, and I hear nothing about it that is going to be implemented or adopted. And one more thing. Donetsk region, Luhansk region, these are industrial areas, and that's the way it has always been. Apart from the military losses and problems, we also have a number of enterprises, chemical, mines, and so on. And it's a very serious component. And green recovery, you think, is not something relevant now, but in these programs that were developed, we do not hear about the green recovery where it could be piloted. And at least the vision of these pilot projects to be prepared, not just plans of getting back Luhansk and Donetsk region, whether or not they have the moral right to become again Ukrainian regions, or should this be changed and the administrative territorial structure? Thank you.
Well, you see how this discussion can really grow. We're not We cannot be against the green recovery because that's a condition of Ukraine facility. I'm all in favor of green recovery. It's just that with Natalia and Alexander, we're concerned that on recovery conferences they don't talk about our component enough. But they do talk about your component, the culture. It's just business part of thing. We invest 300 and we get 500. We'll give you 600, etc., which is okay. There's nothing wrong. We have to accept it. It's a position of businesses and the world. We have to be thankful for that. So, in the country and in this panel discussions, there has to be someone from Ministry of Culture. We don't have a minister at the moment. Maybe there will be later deputies, etc. To Irina, to Ministry of Social. They need that green recovery. The humanitarian part of the work. What they started to produce inside themselves, because they see that there is that the state provides nothing at the moment, so they organized a Crimean office, Crimean platform, and started to work on this deoccupation. So again, it was not about. Yeah, it was not led by the ministries. Another question regarding people and staffing. From time to time, we have different initiatives. The president vetoed the law at the moment, and it will be returned to the parliament, where the relatives are recognized. Because we will be clashing with the EU accession. We cannot. While we access EU, we cannot introduce super stringent actions because that will block parts of human rights in Europe. But on the other hand, we do have to protect our security. So transitional justice is the only way to do it. So it will be some for 5 years, then we'll purge more and we'll proceed to the next stages. So it's a great topic, and I think I've been wondering about statistics. It's some of the insights. I will just ask how many really open criminal cases regarding the MPs. We know some public cases. Unfortunately, we had a defector at Sluga Narodu, certain other people, but it's hard to understand how massive this phenomenon is, especially on public administration, teachers, etc. So it's a very sensitive sphere, basically. Right, and now shortly about the changes. So, yeah, that was all part of the discussion about Crimea and Lugansk and Donetsk. It's about post-war governance. What do we do? Who's bearing what name? Who's part of which region, etc., administration. These are good. So a couple of words on cognitive deoccupation. I want to thank the people who did it. They have the basis and it's ready. So if there are proposals, let's discuss them as well. But in the strategy, the issue of cultural and mental deoccupation, so to say, so the Ukrainian return into Donetsk, Lugansk, and Crimea, it's there, and there are real plans. What are we planning to do? And I will be thankful if you join in and provide your suggestions. It's a living document. Yeah, we have another part of the audience with the questions. Let's be fair. Ruslan Khagach, Eastern Ukrainian National University from Vladimir Dan, Lugansk, Ukraine. I'm a pro-rector. I want to thank the Irina, what Irina said about universities. And we understand that it's the source of the future recovery. But is the institutional recovery possible without retaining the institutions themselves? So the colleagues from legal studies and the expert community, which is now, they don't see future. They see that we need to be, we are reorganized or optimized, etc., etc. So thank you for saying these things, but we would like these things to be turned into real policies, so we understand that. For myself, I understand that I will get back to Lugansk and I will deal with the recovery, rebuilding, and recovery of the territories is tomorrow. But today, we need to recover people who moved out of Ukraine. They may be awaiting, and we should give them signal. You will be needed tomorrow. So we work with the young people. We don't know what to tell them, because we don't know what will be with the relocated universities. They don't see the signals from us that we want to keep these institutions for institutional recovery of territories and communities. Yeah, but you see the signal. So I said I am all in favor of keeping the institutions. Lugansk, how many temporarily replaced universities? 4 of them, and they will all be retained. Just as in Donetsk, Tavrisky University from Crimea, and we want to keep these institutions. Yeah, we have to improve the base. We have to get the students interested and motivated to come to you, also from temporarily occupied territories. But I agree, we need support to these universities. We cannot just put them together. And I talked with the Prime Minister, and he said that it's wrong to just unite universities because they are not capable as other universities. But let's help them and see how capable they will become. So the amalgamation for this year is not yet there. With the help of, well, hopefully we'll deoccupy them, and I support it. There's a regional, there should be a regional presence. Donetsk and Luhansk national universities have to be supported, and then they will give the necessary results after the occupation. Right, we have 6 minutes. Olena Kosinova, Civil Society Organization, Donbass, Ukraine, Reinstallment, Marinska Community. We've been discussing that from 2022, that the local military administrations have to start working on the recovery program, has to at least have them. But when we talk to our own military administration, Marinka, they referred to cabinet ministers 1159 and 487 that we have active warfare in our region. So that's the first thing. What do you do in this case? And the second thing, there'll be a double remuneration for military administrations. So we take our military administration, it was relocated to Dnipro in March 2022, and that over that time, residents of the city in Krasnogorivka haven't seen them even once. So the situation in Krasnogorivka is very difficult. And if you read some local Telegram chat, right now the situation as it was at some point in Irpin and Bucha. A lot of locals were shot. There are dead bodies lying on the street. There are many wounded. I'm sorry, I'm very worried when I talk about it. And those who work, the police of Korachev community, the White Angel. So there are about 500 people. They relocate children. So Marinka administration doesn't even describe what is now so why do we need to increase their remuneration? What are they getting paid right now for? When they don't talk to the people, they don't do anything in that community. Thank you for the signal. we are going to be having meetings on temporarily occupied territories in Kharkiv and Donetsk, and you will tell it. There is Marian local councils, and we will discuss that, right? So I have one reflection, and then the question to Mentalika. Do we need or do we not have to have elections in the occupied communities? In order to integrate people, to get them back to Ukrainian legal space, we have to give them opportunity to give them the choice. We've seen that in Sevastopol, where the locals elected the council, but the mayor was not. So there were different combined options that can be seen. But integrating and returning people to Ukrainian legal space, and it has to be done through local policies. We can limit their participation in national elections, parliament, president, I think would be fair. But local elections, local deputies election, that's the first thing maybe that they have to go to. So to answer your question, when we were facilitating decentralization, the communities use the methodology of building competitive and capable communities. Now these territories are very much damaged, and there's a huge migration. So what is the ministry will do to review this methodology in terms of capable communities in the occupied regions? Thank you for this question. Sure. This methodology has to be reviewed, considering the practical steps already done, because in some cases they need a separate approach, a separate view. And as of now, I understand that we are reforming our staffing in this context, and we'll soon be coming back to this methodology, and we'll discuss what kind of approaches we will apply. Thank you, Irina. Who are you? Andrei Hrudkin, NGO Coalition on the Front Line, Toretsk, Donetsk region. So we met in December 2021, 2 months before the large-scale invasion started, and we were talking that for the Ministry of Reintegration, it would be interesting to engage civil society sector of Donetsk and Luhansk to build in the state policy. And it's so great, Mr. Kornienko, that you've noticed that in Donetsk there was a powerful NGO movement, and now all those hundreds of organizations are spread around Ukraine. Russia banished us and destroyed our houses, but not only NGOs, also businesses and people, and even 5-year-old children who are in Connecticut or somewhere in Ukraine, regardless. So all these years of war, they will have flashbacks after that. They will, in their memories, they get back to their houses, to their emotions. They will be always psychologically navigating to their hometown. So thank you for the draft strategy. It's very specific. You didn't mention a lot of things. So the memory management, so training the new personnel in post-conflict territories. We were reading the strategy. We submitted our proposals. They were declined. They were declined on the basis of you have IDP councils, you should work with them. But IDP councils cannot replace the national level participation in the state policy. So we only have you. We value that. We understand that the ministry is overburdened, but we are ready to provide the mechanism so that we don't overburden the higher level for the sake of some pictures. Well, we exhausted our time for this panel discussion. Thank you, everyone. It was very productive, and we also have presentation from Constitutional Challenges After the Occupation, Irina Haiduchik, Ukrainian Association, and Oleksiy Orlovsky, Director of the Program Democracy and Effective Governance from a Renaissance Foundation. Hello, dear friends. We won't stop. We will resume. As was already announced, we want to present to you the results of a lengthy study that was conducted by a coalition of NGO organizations, self-organizing population, policy reforms, and Lugansk civil initiative supported by International Renaissance Foundation. In this big study, one of the elements of discussion, which is also part of this conference, we formulated a list of questions related to institutional recovery of Donetsk and Lugansk regions. Why we decided to take these regions? Because in that period, as of now, is the most difficult areas, difficult territories in terms of designing individual approaches to them, and the inequality of situation of different territories. There are newly occupied, there are old occupied, there are partially deoccupied, there are territories which were all this time are still under Ukrainian control, etc., etc. So that's why the approaches were very different over the latest 10 years. So we decided to analyze how to better build public administration in these territories, how to properly provide post-war recovery, and we stopped at the four main parts that have become the main focus of this study. First, we analyzed the public governance, which was and is and in the future has to be, what kind of approaches there should be, where to take people for these governmental agencies who will be working there after the occupation. Third question, as well as previous questions and this third question were already mentioned. So it's a question, what do you do with the administrative division of these regions? Why this question? Because we understand the mining, relocation of businesses, relocation of people, casualties, all of these factors that basically destroy, ruin these classic conditions and how a future administrative division should look like. And fourthly, how do you engage people in decision making within this transition period, which we will have sooner or later?
What has been analyzed? And here you see the list of the tools that were used, and obviously is the analysis of norms and regulations, and also sending certain inquiries for information, and holding assessment of the situation in the public authority bodies on different territories using the benchmarking methodology. It's modeling of certain criteria for the future vision of the administrative territorial system of these two regions. Also information screening that's publicly available today, and a number of in-depth interviews with the subjects who works in this topic. Also focus groups in different regions on the government-controlled territory of Donetsk and Luhansk region, and modeling certain opportunities for community participation that are possible according to the results of this study. And so we are going to go through these 4 components of our study that I just mentioned, and obviously we'll start with the system for public governance system. I should say that we are only going to speak about the key conclusions, key findings that we had analyzing these matters, and we're not speaking about all components. Irina will later tell you where you can find these documents, and they're also in your handout materials. I can already tell you, you can go to your folders. There are short briefings there, and the links for QR codes where you can find this information. And we want you to understand that the information is a lot more than we present today, but this is something that we're going to talk about. So the first section about the system for the public administration on these territories. We are to acknowledge, whether we want or not, there must be some transition period after the occupation. And we probably have to recognize that very fast recovery of local self-governments for these territories is unlikely. During that transition period, certain public management bodies must work on all administrative levels that can be there. I will speak about the models, the possible models, and they are to exercise the temporarily functions of the state authorities until the local government is shaped. The second thing, for the entire territory, there must be a single model of transition public administration. It's very unlikely that a very diversified approach can be exercised given the diversity of these territories, but the methodology can be different. So, in fact, we have considered many scenarios, but there are 2 key scenarios that, in our opinion, must be taken into consideration. We don't know how the war ends. We don't know which status of war it will be, if it's going to be the real ending or if it's going to be frozen in some format. We don't know on which level of borders, either borders 1991 or others. We have considered different options, but we ended in these 2 models that I'm going to talk about. Imagine the situation that the conflict is frozen, the war is frozen, and the territory will be completely deoccupied, but some military actions of different intensity will still be ongoing, or there will be the conflict will be frozen. And we are convinced, and the analysts agree, that we will have to go back to the question of the functioning of the military civil administrations on all levels. Here we'll have to update the legislation, the corresponding legislation. Option 2. If we all, of course, believe in this, that Ukraine wins and gains back the borders of 1991 and no other escalations or shellings. So, according to such scenario, we will have to create some special administrations on all levels and prepare new pieces of legislation as in transition format, because the military ones will not be relevant anymore, as we consider there will be no active hostilities ongoing. And on the other hand, the local self-governments won't exist at that moment yet. So what are the challenges that we see on these territories in the current system, management system? Despite all of these conditions, in 4 occupied communities, on the normative level, military civil administration still operate. And In these communities, the military administrations haven't been established. On the other hand, we have 6 communities on the occupied territories where also the military administrations of the settlements are not established, but still the local self-government is exercising power. That's a different situation. We have the situation when it's not clear enough the powers are distributed between the military administrations of different levels, and quite often they overlap their functions and powers on different levels. And mainly there are certain safety issues that are de facto now in the sphere of competence of the military administrations of the towns or villages, and the local budget money spent on this. Another thing we noticed that the powers of the local governments are not transferred to the administrations of these settlements, but to their managers, heads of the military administration. So not to the bodies, but to specific officials, which has certain impact as well. A lot has been said about high social inquiry for justice today. And when we had focus groups and interviews, it's one of the key positions, one of the key inquiries that exists today among representatives of the civil society organizations. Because the inquiry for justice, for safety, for these people who will return to these territories, who will come there with their families and their children, it's one of the key basic positions, without which I don't think we can tackle these issues with the institutional recovery that will be there in this region. So here we must talk about, refining the bodies from collaborators or pro-Russian ones. So this is one of the key positions that we have highlighted, and so you have even a dedicated slide for this in order to put emphasis on this request that exists in the society. So, what do we suggest to do in accordance with this direction? We think on the level of the law there must be done a few things. First of all, the president must be given the powers on the emergency decision-making for the liquidation of the military civil administrations of the settlements, and on their basis to establish the military administrations right after the legal status of the martial law. And the heads of the civil military administrations become the heads of the military administrations of these corresponding towns. A second thing we see, that is one of the issues on the level of legislation, that's the issue related to the possibility of appointment when the head of the local government is appointed as the head of the military administration. And here we have questions related to returning to the position and guarantee of the status, let's say, of the city mayor after he stops fulfilling his function of military-specific nature. So we must regulate these issues on the level of legislation. And another thing, it's necessity of transfer of powers of local self-governments, not to the heads of the administrations, but directly to bodies, the military administrations of these settlements. Second thing, we spoke about the diversity of the managerial system on these two territories, and that is, we have to establish the military administrations in all communities of Luhansk and Donetsk regions, and have the clear differentiation between the powers of different levels of military administrations, to develop the criteria system and mechanisms for evaluation and possibility for holding elections on the deoccupied territories, and to have the local self-governments. This must be done on the regular basis. We must clearly define the criteria according to which some time later, on some territories, with different, of course, speed, the local self-governance can be recovered. We understand that there are different territories are in different status. So the government-controlled territories, the occupied territories, or newly liberated territories. So these are the mechanisms to be produced by the state. And another problem is related to transition justice. Thank you, Oleksiy. We don't have much time left, so I will try to tell you in brief about our next direction and about the staffing provision of the public administration. A lot has been said about this during our first panel discussion, and indeed one of the key tasks for recovery of the public administration in Donetsk and Luhansk region is provision of the authorities with a professional motivated staff. And many questions we had on account of the way we should motivate the staff, either payment or other incentives. And in our study on the staffing, we also looked for the answers and managed to prepare recommendations based on it. So first of all, the questions we had. So first, what is the staffing policy in Donetsk and Luhansk region? Second question was, what are the regional specifics that must be taken into consideration when we speak about the staffing of the public administration in the Luhansk and Donetsk region? Third question, we studied the staffing capacity of these bodies, and we also studied the challenges and threats for the staffing that exists now when we speak about forming this manpower reserve and the ones that can exist in the future. And the last question concerns the approaches that must be implemented by the central authorities on the staffing provision. And now about the data, findings and recommendations. So first finding, lack of staff, even though we do have the core of the staffing. And you can find a lot of data on this finding in the big analytical or policy briefing, but I should say that what's worth attention, that is, as of the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the norms and regulations on the activity of public authorities was changed, and these amendments were aimed at providing the conditions and opportunities of work during the martial law. And primarily, these amendments enabled to preserve the staffing resource in the public administration bodies and also to provide for functioning of these bodies during the full-scale invasion. At the same time, we noticed that among these novelties and amendments to the norms and regulations, there was very little of those that aimed at facilitating the enhancement of the manpower provision of the public administration on the deoccupied territories. And as for the staffing component, the institutional vertical of authorities in the Donetsk and Luhansk region, it's still there, and it can still fulfill some functions. Why we say some functions? Because we understand that not all functions, I mean, there are functions that we cannot fulfill because of the active hostilities or because there are territories that are occupied. And according to the results of the study, we see that the core of this manpower composition of these public administrations in the cities, towns and villages, it exists as of 2022 and 2023. Many bodies were evacuated from the active hostility zones, and they were placed in other regions to be able to exercise their functions remotely. And on this slide, you see the information about the quantity of the employees in two regions. And the study shows that this number has decreased significantly, but it differs in Luhansk and Donetsk region, and you see that if it's Donetsk region, it's 72 positions filled out and 65% in Donetsk. And according to the results of our study, we also see that this staffing hunger is present at the lower level, basically. And we got the data from the local self-governments of the military administrations, not all of those. We did not get a lot of data, but even those data that we did get, we see that the lack of employees is a lot more tangible than on the regional level. Another thing that we noticed in the study is about the staff list, and they haven't changed much. And this is the question that should be addressed as well, because the functions and loads of work of the authorities change much what we had before the full-scale invasion. So the staff lists or the staffing table also must be considered. So, as for the challenges and bottlenecks of the staffing, I did mention about the staff list of 2022-2023, that they haven't changed much. Then we also speak about the challenges and bottlenecks, and it's about the perspective initiatives for reforming the civil service. According to the findings of the study, and also from the practical point of view, we see that many initiatives, reforming initiatives, they were seized on pause because of invasion, but some time has passed, and we need to catch up with these reforms. And it's also very important for the staffing to finish these reforms and to give an impetus to make the reforming of the civil service efficient. As for the draft of manpower reserves, and it has been mentioned today during the plenary session and the opening remarks, according to the findings, that we didn't just speak about the inquiries for information. We requested some statistics, but we also spoke to the representatives of the community, of authorities, and many conclusions were made based on these direct interviews, talks. And as for the staffing, manpower reserves and the bottlenecks and challenges, so far we see very modest results, and exceptionally on the needs of the staff, and that they are much greater. And a lot has been mentioned today when we speak about the staffing, that we should also pay attention whom we need, yes, in accordance with the inquiry, to act in accordance with inquiry. And then low salary in the civil servant, it doesn't correlate with the level of responsibility and the risks that they hold. And this has also been mentioned today, maybe in another focus, but still. And so many say that we need to look for other incentives. Yes, there are risks, and we understand that exercising or holding these positions and exercising their activity, they also have risks that must be taken into consideration. There must be certain stimuli for them to be willing to be civil servants and to hold this responsibility.
Another important thing that is mentioned often in different discussions, it is regarding the legal clarity. If this work is officially a public service, how the career management is made, how the bonuses are accrued and allocated. And again, it's about a comprehensive system of training the experts. So what we also have seen in the course of our study is where do we get this potential staffing. And on the discussions, it can be civil society activists, it can be military, but at the same time, we've asked from civil society whether they are ready for that. There is a lot of hopes laid on them, so what do they think about it? And these are some considerations that we've talked about: the lack of trust, though, fairness. It's what the Oleksiy said about transitional justice and fairness and all criteria that we have to maintain in order to have this trust. We're also saying that we're lacking the financial and non-financial stimuli. It's also important. We've seen how certain risks are existed, and the donors at the moment, they take a lot of people. And the level of salaries that the donors can offer is incomparable with what we offer in the public services. So that's one of the other challenges. So we need to invest in recruiting in veterans community. That is also one of the tasks and challenges. And it's important to be able to hire external people who are not public servants. Not everybody is ready to be a public servant, but they are ready to work in recovery. And so we have to find other formats and approaches. And now about key recommendations. So reviewing the the job roster for these administrations. It's about designing the specialized system of motivation. It's about the importance of continuation of this project and HR reserve, workforce reserve. We need more results in that. Correct our approaches to public order for retraining and training of our workforce. So this is also cooperation with institutions and universities, and the shift-based method for public officials on the occupied territories. It's a very important recommendation. I understand that it's a very widely discussed question. Took 2 minutes about this administrative territorial division, and the situation will be different. In rayons and communities, and so it was the territory was basically divided artificially previously because they needed to lay borders somewhere. And now about criteria. So criteria. Right now there were 5 criteria to define how capable the community is. In the new conditions, in this kind of format, these criteria will not be able to use them. So that's why we suggested preliminary assessment indicators for the period of the deoccupation, and put them to 3, partially reviewed what we have right now. So first thing we did, we believe that the number of population in the community to be at minimal level, 3,000 people who are constantly residing on that territory. The community has to have certain number of students who will be training there, and basically building the potential future. And we also suggest some minimal amount. And thirdly is the part of the capable population that lives in that. There's a minimal number the colleagues have calculated in order to work in different scenarios. We were looking into different scenarios. There were pessimistic, there were optimistic, preliminary, realistic scenario, but still at minimum 2,100 people in a community have to work. And another thing, just one more slide to show you in this part, is the amount of communities that can be by the time of the assessment. By the end of 2023, we were based on an optimistic scenario. What is an optimistic scenario? That there will be no less than 70% of people, which is very unlikely. But in that case, we see that there are significant prospects of making the communities smaller, especially in the Lugansk region, and also the amount of rayons. If there's less than 70%, we stress that there should be a completely different administrative territorial division within these territories. Right, thank you. And traditionally, when we talk about civil engagement, it's I will try and tell you about our key conclusions. You can read more in more detail. We've seen what tools are working, why, if not working, what do we have right now on the legislative level in terms of are there any bans or obstacles to using this? Because the territories have to recover in close cooperation. And there will be panel discussion about this limits of this cooperation between the authorities and the civil society, how to do it so that it's effective by planning and implementing. So again, in the result of this study, we said that the priority model of democracy, it has to be advisory. So the initiator and the driver of this interaction, cooperation, invitation to the dialogue, it has to be authorities, and it has to initiate engagement of activists in order to build the shared scenarios, shared vision, and implement them. So again, we have some basic tools defined. We have a lot of discussion-based questions that are emerged previously. What do you do with self-organized population that are officially registered on occupied territories? When these territories will be deoccupied, what status they will have, how they will have to work. We talked about statutes of territorial communities. Is there now an opportunity? Do we have to provide this opportunity to design, to approve how this should work, etc., etc.? You can read all about it in our analytical data reports, but as to the key recommendations based on area, that's the first thing. And it's been done, not by us, but we understand that it's with our participation, and it's a very important step. It's about passing the law 82/83 about people's democracy, and May this year it was approved. It's not yet signed by the president, but it's going to be a sufficient step to be using the participation tools. Next step is the law on public consultancy. It's also one of these participation elements, and it's very important because that law 82/73 provides the public consultancy to describe all these criteria and procedures by these specialized laws. So we cannot use them right now before it's being passed. The left draw 63/19 to regulate some functions in self-organized population. It's a very important draft law in community engagement, and there are some recommendations what should be included there so that it works in this transitional period. So design the changes in the law of Ukraine on martial law, which should define what makes special the local democracy in martial law. Because right now we don't have these peculiarities. We have only the ban for public meetings. As for the transitional period, there should be similar norms in participation and democracy. On central level, there should be advisory and methodology support organized for military administrations, and maybe to see some visions and tools and methods and mechanisms that are really workable, and then to prioritize these mechanisms of this advisory democracy in local administrations, at least the transitional period. That is the will of the representatives of the military administration, but there's a demand from civil society and activists, and it's significant. So I hope, and as I promised, so there's a platform, you can scan it or use the QR code on the doors, and this is the website where you can find the study results and some info messages and everything that is thanks to our experts who are engaged on the project, and thanks to Renaissance Foundation. So we encourage activists and the authorities, everyone, to communicate on these platforms. The platform is now called The Future of the East. It's part of the public space now, so please go to that link and let's keep communicating on that. Maybe some questions? Right, looking back at the time, maybe we'll postpone the lesson for lunchtime. Right, thank you. So we'll be talking about the next panel discussion is about institutional recovery after the occupation. So we were talking about people who do it manually, locally. Tamila Tasheva, our representative of President in Crimea, Natalia Lushina, head of the National Agency in Public Service, Igor KULEBA, head of the Civil Society Organization Political Reforms, and head of the administration, Donetsk, Alexander. We have the time until 1:30, and after that time we'll be taking questions from the audience. I'd like to start from practical things. We've just heard the presentation, and I was impressed by a number from 20 to 50% understaffing in regional civil administrations. You will feel it, because when we talk about institutional recovery of regions, institutions don't work without people, and it cannot be not for people. They're all for people and with the people. So I'm going to start with maybe a fantastical question or fantasy question. Let's imagine tomorrow we return these territories, hypothetically. Right now, do we have people to send over there to at least do something? So that's a very short view, just a short version. Thank you, Vadim. I don't represent local civil administrations, but I'm so happy that we, at this very level, such a profound and in-depth discussion. When the representative office started working on this back in 2022, when we started designing, based on our presentation, the vision of recovery, autonomy, a republic other than the city of Sebastopol, it was first about restoring the public authorities. So, and of course, we were raising the issue of staffing reserve, what kind of number of staff do we need. So we were calculating what will be the necessary amount of workforce to restore your work that you had before 2014. And we received a shocking number. That is no less than 50,000, only for Crimea and Sebastopol. So to give you a short answer, of course, the need is much higher than we can provide at the moment. But we've heard it in the presentation, and back in 2022, we're also mentioning that there are several options. One option is to create an HR reserve or candidate reserve, and I'm so thankful to the Ministry of Reintegration that we launched it in 2023. There can be some criticisms. We may be understaffed, but the fact that the toolkit is created is very good. It's one thing when people are directed to submit themselves. Another thing is when they do that on their own volition, and it's also about the incentives. As we were talking with Natalia Lushina, we said that we cannot just sit and wait for the public servants or representatives of civil administration from Lviv, let's say, or Chernihiv, or Odessa, that they will go down to these difficult regions, psychologically difficult, because it's territorial recovery through propaganda, breaking through propaganda and being not accepted by locals. So the issue of travels should be properly incentivized. Vadim, I represent military administration. We have people from local authorities and military administrations, village administration. We are indeed understaffed. We are understaffed, and I've been listening today how we should select the people. But there's a very simple question, and I support Mariupol's mayor here about the remuneration for the work. So we were working together in engaging people in military administrations. So there are competitive positions like IT jobs. Believe me, we all understand that no IT professional will work for 15 or 25,000 per month, where IT jobs pay double at least. HR workers, it's hard work to find the candidates, to select them, to do some checks because it's public service. So it's a huge amount of work, and the same salary. We can't have that. We have the visiting service, visiting nurses, etc., but still same salary. If we talk about engaging people from other regions, with the Ministry of Internal, National Police, we do have some roster. Who's going to Lugansk, in which city, helping the local police precinct. But it's a law enforcement. Army, the police, the border guards who have, they are used and they are capable of sleeping on the floor on a caramate or but if you take just people from the regions, from peaceful regions, so you have to bring them somewhere, you have to place these people somewhere. And now at the very beginning we had this interesting remark that we have to understand, the locals have to understand what happens locally. We're all from Lugansk and Donetsk. 90% of them know very superficially, not because they are unwilling to know, but because they don't get this information. And that's that can be said about the buildings as well. So when we were working on a strategy, Lugansk took the example from zero. Having cities like Bakhmut or other frontline cities like Popasna, starting from this zero, from frontline, rebuilding houses, facilities, and authorities, you need a lot of people for that. But in order to be competitive, to hire them, social support, it's not. It's only about people. We're not even talking about the facilities and infrastructure. What is to be done to hire those people, to provide everything necessary for them so that they can work and to do everything for them. And then they will be the first, the law enforcers will be the first to enter the liberated cities. So that's what we call stabilization. It's about stabilizing the first 90 days when the first military administrations, social services, doctors, we're not even talking about teachers. In order to get back teachers and students, we need to demine these regions. So that's, and we need to work with the young people. It's hard to work with young people.
And those who come from Donetsk and Luhansk understand, because our children, they now, of course, leave school leavers or they graduate from universities, but can they just wait for a year? They have to be employed in other cities, maybe in Kiev, and then it will be very difficult to get them back then. Of course, there are such patriots, and I know people from different cities who are just saying, just liberate the area, territory, and I'll go with you. And it may not even be the civil servant, it can be just a civilian, it can be the pensioner or even young people like 18, 19 who come to meeting and say, I want to go home, I'll go there. This is a very simple thing. Hunger will somehow be tackled, but we have to prepare the platform. I'm not saying that now we should make the Luhansk or Donetsk administration 800 people, but when tomorrow we're going to make first step, you know, when we prepare the program, we need just to communicate with every head of the military administration. He'll tell you that they have 10 employees. It's the sociologist, the head, the deputy, the infrastructure specialist, and they all know the clear information. They have the agreement with the Oshchad private bank, Ukrposhta, new post office, like who, what, when, and comes with what, up till the generators. Because when we arrive, the social matters will be #1 priority. And when we practice this and see what we need, we have to start accumulating this, because if it happens tomorrow, these 10 people will go right away. Yes, we have them. Alexander, and what about you? Do you have such 10 persons? Do you agree with Artem? The question is the following. Donetsk and Luhansk region, some part of the territory was occupied as of 2014. And if we speak now about the territories that were occupied after the February 22nd, 2022, 24, yes. Of course, we don't have the whole staffing. And you cannot say that just come and start working like 100 people of administration. And we also have experience. After February 24th, we have 50 settlements that were deoccupied, and we have practice of how it happens. Like first, stabilization measures, but altogether at the same time we had Oshchad Bank entering and the humanitarian organizations operating there, and they keep on operating there. So the scheme is there. If we speak about the territories that were occupied as of 2014, the situation is much more complicated. In accordance with the distribution, 20 communities are there. And there are big question marks related to these communities. If this territory is occupied, who will go to work there? We heard now that there are servicemen who will return from the front line and they will go there to work there. But that's also a big question mark. If these people got used to solve problems with the enemy in the past 2 years, but these territories, unfortunately, are perceived in that way because the population there is not only our population, the one that there are also a lot of people who were delivered from Russia there. So will they have the psychological preparedness to solve some problems without applying physical force? So many questions related to these territories. Thank you for the clarification, Alexander. Natalia. Alexander specified that the territories that were occupied in Donetsk and Luhansk region in 2014, we have the specific attitude to it, right? So they are potentially considered not as a friendly territory. And then I'll be brave enough to say that there's also such a specific attitude to the civil service, either saying that it's a low-paid job or it's all about bribes and lots of corruptive, civil servants. So, what do you think is the status of the civil servant today like, and if people are ready to join, because that's in your hands? Well, that you mixed it up quite all right. It seems like, well, first of all, I would like to thank to all those present, because all are in Kyiv, in Ukraine, and some of those you have arrived from other territories. Not everybody moved out. And first thing I should say that we do have reserve to over 2,400 persons. We cooperate with you, Artem, with the military administrations, with the Donetsk administration, military administration, and I should say that having the reserve in place, I think the most critical question today is to preserve those who work today, to retain them, because now there will be the question on cancellation of booking. What can I suggest to the civil service today? I have studied your report and I worked it through using my pencil. And thank you for the study, because we need such expert studies to shape our policy. And I should say that you are quite right that it is in our hands, but this is the responsibility of the society as well, because the question, this is about integrity. When you were presenting the study, and now I speak about the previous speakers, I should say that it's very easy to get some hype in order to increase ratings, but when we speak about the civil servants, there must be the ban of using the word state official that we have inherited back from the Soviet times, or no, the Peter I. And I should like to underline that we have to respect the civil service and the civil servants who work morning till the evening doing the job, and they are working very hard, and it's not all right, to publish some article in some newspaper or magazine and to talk about them in general, saying that they're all officials. I also want justice for civil servants, a dignified attitude to them, because they remain on the deoccupied territories, on the active hostilities territories. For them, Resolution 391 was developed, and there are people who question why that deputy had a higher salary than I had in Poltava. Then I tell them, well, then go there, go to Sumy region and start working there, where the managed aerial bombs are flying. Well, they don't want to go there. Yes, salary is a critical question, and I will explain why. August 31st, the decision was made on the meeting of the Prime Minister when the Minister of Finances presented the vision on the start of the reform of the payment, of labor payment. And you know, we have the framework, and that is the bill that was adopted in the first reading 10 months ago. And this means that almost 1 year we cannot even approach the second reading and second preparation. And in fact, it is a framework that could be used not to just survive, but this is going to be the good existence conditions for the civil servants. It's about fairness, fairness in labor cost, in remuneration of the employees, and we made also an assessment. I would like to put an emphasis that we do not live in accordance with the Bill 8892, but we use the law or the bill on the state budget. And I should underline that given the capacity of the local budget, the Minister of Finances has suggested the model for survival, and they have also suggested us the certain safeguards, because some of the vacancies are abolished. For many years we were surviving thanks to the funds. But now the main share of the salary has increased, and this is the fact. And the Minister of Finances insists on, if we compare the main components of the salary of the civil servant this year and last year, then it has increased. But we all survived because we had the foundation. And now we do not have this chance anymore. But we have a salary today, and the situation can occur when we will not have financing at all, the financing from the state budget, I mean. And that would be the critical situation. And if we do not get assistance from the foreign partners who have certain liabilities to support, and now it's about us fulfilling our liabilities in accordance with the Plan Ukraine facility. And I should highlight 8292 bill is implemented in Ukraine facility as the mandatory framework. I just know that today this is going to be my only chance to tell you the main difference on how to live from the state budget, saying that some of the components of this model are implemented into the state budget, and what is in 8222, when the state authorities are calculating their own needs and then they transfer this information either to the regional administration, and then the regional administration provides it to the Minister of Finances or to the central executive bodies, calculate the fund, and then give this information to the Ministry of Finances. And then the Ministry of Finances considers this and includes that into the state budget. Today, given the opportunities of the state budget, we have the chance to obtain the fund that basically, led to crisis, the Minister of Finances. And today, 8222 bill has already been lodged, and we all got the budget declaration, and we all have now the idea according to which rules we're going to live in the next year. So, summing up, I should say, this was the difference. And we, of course, thought that we were to be the competitive as the state authority in the labor market. Yes, we maybe pay less than the private sector, but we we can go to work every day, and it's guaranteed, because when you're in business, if you don't go to work today, then you didn't make any money. But this, in the civil service, it's a guaranteed salary. And second question we heard today, when introducing the military administration status, the Bill 9478 that has been developed by the government, it has been added for 6 times to the agenda, to the parliament, and it hasn't been voted for not even once. So this is about the status. It's about the range and also the experience of the civil servants for those who work in the military civil administrations. Of course, I have a lot to say, but I guess I already took too much time, so thank you, and I would like to pass the floor back to you. Okay, thank you, Natalia. Now I want to ask a question, because a dignified salary, it's something we should start with, because that's about dignity, when your basic needs are covered and you can work. And secondly, it's about the efficiency as well. But Mr. Ihor, I have the following question for you. If we understand the necessity of the dignified salary in these institutions, of the institutional recovery, then what goes after this? Which qualities or which conditions do you think are required to make this recovery efficient? Thank you for your question, and thank you for the invitation to this wonderful forum. If you allow me, I would like to comment what goes before and what goes after this, because in fact the problem of money is somewhere in the middle. Knowing the text or the essence of this bill, I have prepared 5 items that I would like to present during this discussion. But primarily, I want to start with greeting the initiators and the executives, the Renaissance Foundation, and all the stakeholders. Indeed, this was a very creative and responsible, constructive work. In the process, I have recalled not once that in the previous years I managed to work with the authority. When I had some ideas, I would just come, they would listen to me, and they would tell me that in this part you are wrong, here you forgot to consider this and that, and it would be an enrichment for me, and then they would also thank me for some proposals. And now, unfortunately, the authority works in a different way. Everybody says, give us, and then we'll decide what goes to the trash bin and what we will use. But we will not even thank you because you don't need this. And I say, no, thank you, and so on. So in this part, it was a wonderful work, and I do hope that this is the way we will keep on working, cooperating. A wonderful presentation of findings we saw today, and Mr. Orlovsky spoke about institutional part of the authorities, and as administrative territorial system, one nuance must be added. We heard, and you were quite right when you mentioned in the materials that at the optimistic scenario, somewhere we understand what is the administrative territorial system to be, but if it's a pessimistic scenario, we saw on the slide that it would be a completely new administrative territorial system, and they often ask us, what do you understand by that? So this is about the situation may occur when, as a result of the hostilities on big territories, there will be like the territories would be damaged and mined, and so there will be a big human outflow of this, and they will be brought to the condition when people just don't want to live there or to go back there very soon or fast. And basically in that situation today two polar opinions are expressed. On the one side, they say that we have to revisit the criteria for community establishments because we may have the depopulated area, so we have to have the community less than 3,000, 100 kilometers here, 100 kilometers there. And others say that our approach is we cannot do this at all. We cannot, just ignore the criteria for the efficient organization of administrative system and authority for the entire territory just based on one piece of territory. So, and if this happens for these territories, we are going to have to implement the special piece of legislation on organizing the management on this territory, and that's what we call the special on new administrative territorial system.
Maybe for a while, I don't mean not entire oblast territories, but on some parts of it, it can come to not being able to build a capable community. So they will have to be managed differently, but still will have to provide, after the transition justice, there should be representative democracy established, and of course the executive power, etc., that has to be working there. So it's in that part. Secondly, in these discussions we have identified quite a lot of challenges which we'll see even now that would have to be resolved right now without waiting for the active warfare to end. So out of these challenges, I would like to state three in particular. The amendments to the law, to martial law, introduced in 2022, and the way military administrations are shaped. Back then, it was not much attention dedicated to it. Everybody thought that it was not for long, and it's not so important to maintain all those nuances. Now that we see that the war is protracting, and we don't know when it's going to end, and we'll have to live in this all. So then the question is it right when there's local self-governance maintained, but there's also military administration created? I don't see any logic in that. The only explanation to this, it's not about Donetsk and Luhansk. There were other territories where we had examples like that, but the legislation is still the same, and so there is a connection. I think the error here is that they were concerned about security and powers and authority, and decided to burden that on the military administrations in residential areas, because that's wrong, because that's why we have military administrations. They will have to maintain the security issues. The local authorities have to do their job, and it's not to mix. Whenever this is mixed, we believe it's always problematic. Second problem is that the military, the martial law and local elections. In 2025, in a year, the term of the mandate of the local authorities expires, and we would need to go through elections. And there are people often ask questions, what do we do if the war is not over by then? With the national elections, we have clear answers, and of course neither parliamentary nor presidential elections in the martial law is not possible, even on part of the territory. because at least we extract out of this process part of the electorate. But with the local self-governance, it's a completely different situation. It's about 2/3 or even more of the territory of Ukraine that are more or less normalized and they can function. And so when we, on this territory for some long time, we protract the terms of local authorities, we erode the management and management culture, management experience, and that is also about local self-governance. We have to look for options how on that territory, which is unrelated to direct warfare, in 2025, how do we organize local elections and have them. Even the councils themselves and heads of councils, and they largely have changed over the times of war. And that is again the proposal for to think about. And the last, the law on local administrations, draft law 4298, it's often tied to the function of oversight on legality of local state administrations. But in fact, this law is not only needed for oversight, it is required as a basis for function of local administration. We call them military administrations now, or martial administrations, but their powers and their mandate, their staffing will have to happen right now. And even more so, this draft law would have to answer for the future. What do we do if on some territories in the future and now, on the peaceful territories right now, where there is no front line, what if for some reason local authorities disappear? We don't have an answer to this question. The law of most European countries, they do have an answer. Either a commissar is appointed or some kind of powers to delegated to local administration. So we have to look at this. And we have worked out the number of proposals. They would have to be included in the law in this final revision, but somehow it's still expecting for 3 years now in the parliament after it was passed in the first reading. Well, military administrations already want to speak. Artyom was the first. So on the territorial distribution, yeah, of course, I don't see the need to create something new. But in many regions, Lugansk and Donetsk understand that as nobody else, there has to be an increase. Especially, it's about small communities that we used to have before, agricultural, back in Donetsk as well. They won't survive on their own right now. They won't make the ends meet, and depopulation, etc. But that's not even the biggest challenge. Even if the people will come, the part of the Lugansk was quickly occupied. Some people failed to escape. Some people defected. And we see that there are hospitals in big cities like Starobirsk, Rubizhne, Svatovo, Popasna, who will be able, and they have the potential and human resources and doctors. But in smaller communities, they don't, because they moved out. Same thing about schools. Some were occupied, some defected. And even the agricultural region, and they had agreements with international organizations to create the demining brigades. We're training these brigades. But realistically, in order to demine that community, it takes a year at least. And we see that in Kharkiv as well. So I would say we'll have to increase at least temporarily. But to change the entire administrative distribution, that's a costly process. There are some territories where it has to be done, but overall in the country, that will be colossal funds, and we will spend that money instead of using it for actually needed things. So, as for the security situation, I disagree, and I think none of the head of the local military administration would not agree, because, well, it's law enforcers that they have, the fire brigades, the police, law enforcement, they are responsible for their functions, and we all it's the head of the military administration. Head of the Ryan administration are responsible for other things. So security factor is for the head of the regional administration or a military administration. So these are the two remarks, but they're important because the strategy, any strategy, ask anyone, what's the strategy built upon? On law enforcement. Emergency response, because who have the material for response? Security, it's an emergency response. So public service is great, visiting service is great. We have a lot of stuff to do for them. Roads, water supply, but they are now empty. People have moved out. Yeah, the state power will arrive, and then this Severodonetsk, they have 8 to 7 people in reserve. But they have to save money. People don't have jobs. They moved out, and it's going to be hard to find a great specialist. In Lugansk, we know that we have a catastrophe with water because Balakoivsk water basin is destroyed, and that was the main barrier for Lugansk. Yeah, there are some options. We do work. There is a project, $15 billion worth, to build a new one, because the other one was old and it didn't work out. But by whom? Who do you employ? There will be some contractors, companies arriving, yeah, of course. But we talk about bringing our people. They have to be given jobs, employment. So it's employment factor, not some migrants come over and build everything. But no, your people. It's a generation. It's returning people. So I'm going to talk about territorial division. I support that. It's going to be also depending on what was during the occupation, what was during the occupation. If it was quick, like there was a threat of surrounding or a siege, but most of the facilities have survived. But the way it is now happening in the Donetsk region, when our troops are retreating from remaining area, if at least one house is there, so now there's a front line. But you cannot say that it's deoccupied and people will be going back. No, they won't be coming back. Children or specialists, kindergartens, we need much more for them to return. There has to be some facilities, some basic facilities, but there aren't any. Donetsk and Lugansk, it was an industrial zone. There were a lot of mono locations, that there are 2 mining operations, etc. And so it's fully dependent from certain industry. Now they are destroyed. There's no diversification possible at all. So again, how these communities will survive, even if I have some maybe unique experience. I was head of the community from 2020, as Alexander Kornienko mentioned, that community. Then for a year, we were working as not as a military administration, but as local self-governance. So within a year, we got the deputies for a session. When the community itself is being shot at by artillery, then they introduced military administration. The head of administration appeared. So the experience we're discussing now, how it's better to do it. The decisions should be made in a teamwork. Sometimes you have to decide for in a minute or two, because if you don't go, you get shelled. So the way I see it now, this decision that whenever there's warfare, there's a territory close to the warfare, when there's a military administration created, it's optimal. Yeah, there are remaining status questions, but the decision, when it's made unanimously by someone, and that person bears responsibility for that decision, we understand it. You know, sometimes the MPs get together and they don't know who's responsible. Here, though, people are responsible. Sometimes there are not even MPs to talk about. That's not democratic. Yeah, democracy is possible when there's peace. Right now, unfortunately, there's war still going on. And I'm talking about territories where there's war going on. When they built a bridge, yeah, you know, there are solutions, decisions that are made for the sake of the military. There will be more. Yeah, Tamila is also ready to be part of this round. So what I wanted to stress when we talk about Sebastopol and Crimea is that if in Donetsk and Lugansk there was an opportunity to develop local self-governance, there were some elections, but for Crimea and Sebastopol, basically nobody was doing anything like that starting from 2014. So no state agency was delivering their functions. So we were talking about recovery of the territories. Of course, we have one strategy, and it will soon be approved in the government, but we have to understand certain specifics. That each of the temporary occupied territories, including the territory that were occupied for a long time, I'm going to dwell on this. Second important thing to say, we need to really differentiate between the documents that are passed on the level of or adopted in the Cabinet of Ministers or separate state agencies, and in particular the plan, the stabilization. It's not publicly available. We've been presented some parts of it, and it's about stabilization. First 90 days, when our law enforcement enter the deoccupied territory, how they stabilize the situation. But when we talk about the strategy that's going to be passed on the government, that's a strategy of reintegration of the entire deoccupied territories. So when we talk about Crimea and Sebastopol, none of the state agencies that would have to deliver their function fully is not doing so. Even our public agencies will not be able to, although we have relocated back in 2014, first in Kherson, then in Kiev, but not the Parliament of Crimea, not the Crimean Council of Ministers didn't deliver their function. So we realized that we need to somehow respond to this. So when we were saying, talking about the bigger rayons, other sort of regional distribution. So if it works for our oblast, for Donetsk and Luhansk, for Crimea in 2020, after the parliament decided the new rayons, it didn't work. So we, understanding that in 2023, unblocked this decision, so the president has an opportunity to create military administrations at least in 10 regions. Now we have a different stage. It's where we create managerial bodies on the occupied territories. So together with the Ministry of Reintegration, together with the Ministry of Infrastructure, I don't remember what's the new name, but we registered a draft law 064 March 4, 2024, and it's very important. We expect it to be passed through all the necessary committees in the parliament, and by doing so we will provide the powers and we'll create the military administration of Republican level, and we'll give it the powers to act as a Council of Ministers in Crimea, which is now not being done. But without this, after these stabilization days will pass for the occupied Sebastopol, we won't be able to do anything. So this systemic work has to go on. We have to work with everybody together, on the cabinet of ministers and the MPs, because the tools of democracy, we don't have to forget it. Representative democracy as well. So it's the parliament that passes and authorizes very important decisions. Without them, with the cabinet ministers alone, we wouldn't be able to resolve certain important issues. One more thing, the staffing that Vadim was mentioning in the first discussion. Other than creating human HR reserve, you have to work with people. We're happy that there are agencies who work systemically with education. They are submitting their candidates to the public service reserve, but the training programs, they have to be implemented. The university, Shevchenko University, we had this program started in 2023 for all the occupied territories. So democratic governance, there are 2 educational programs. So I'm very much encouraging you to submit your candidacy next academic year. With Karazin University, we are now making the curating curriculum for the next academic year, learning from Shevchenko University. In Karazin will have this program as well. So those who are close to Kharkiv, you can also submit your candidacy there. There's also a curriculum in International Management Institute. It's for managers, for people who they can submit their candidacy for the occupied territories or wherever they need in Donetsk and Luhansk and other regions which were occupied for some time, because you cannot just submit your candidacy in reserve and then forget about these people. You can't have that. And so when we were looking for the staff in our small representative office, we were asking them, show us what people you have that submitted their candidacy to the reserve, because that stimulates people to keep that important context of going back to the deoccupied territories. We know that it's not yet the time, but we cannot afford sitting and waiting while the 2,400 people will say goodbye to them. So 498. Natalia wanted to say something? Yeah. So it's a short intervention regarding what Tamila said with staffing, with the reserve recovery. That's what we call it. So you got to work with them. And right now, from the high school, public administration, there's a constant trainings going on of candidates, those who submitted their resumes to the HR reserve, and that's happening every year. It's in the budgetary program, and this year as well. So you stressed again that we see the midterm indicators in the educational needs for the deoccupied territories. And here, let me tell you that for the years 25-27, we scheduled to train 5,000 such people. Public officials who are planning to go through training to manage the deoccupied territories. In 2023, we had 19 training programs for public officials in terms of deoccupation and reintegration of temporarily occupied territories and managing the occupied territories as well. I want to stress that 15 programs. What's the content of these programs? It's understandable that it's internal, but programs itself are like this: the team building, legality and labor safety, social entrepreneurship, infrastructure, energy efficiency, public fund, finance, rational use of natural resources. I just wanted to stress that we are training people that are now willing to return. But at the same time, starting June, there will be educational marathon dedicated to management of the occupied territories. So other than this training, there's also experimental program organized by cabinet ministers. It's Executive Order 649 to improve qualification of leading managers, specialists in public administration who are willing to work in public administration in the occupied territories. The coordinator of this program is the Ministry of Education and Science. The executive part of this experimental project is the University of Shevchenko, and in particular the Institute of Public Administration, which is also present here today. Separately, since I was looking at all of this with the pencil in hand, and I want to stress that there are some issues in state educational order or graduate order. So the state graduation order is happening according to these established rules of competition-based selection. So it's all digitized. There's a knowledge management portal. All the higher educational establishments know about it. It's about master's programs of public administration, specialty 271. So it's very transparent, and they get selected. Unfortunately, this year there is less, according to the passport of budgetary program, there is less of these graduates necessary for the state.
So there will be a lot less of the also opportunities offered. And altogether, I see that the increase of qualification is done by the regional centers for qualification and also the establishments, the training, educational institutes of higher school for public administration. And I should say that to a full extent, it is covered, because when we spoke about the staffing reserve, I want to tell you some pieces of practice, the way it's actually happening, who applied for this reserve, and Natalia, these are the details, like for the staffing reserves, but we are running out of time, so sorry, we do not have enough time. We have one more lot. So this conversation actually shows how difficult it is to speak about abstract things of recovery of the deoccupied territories without knowing in what way they will be deoccupied, what the situation we'll have there, and then we just start, referring to something well-grounded, and are facing many little things, pinpoint things that we have to tackle here and now. I would like to have the last round about the institutional recovery, where recovery it sounds ambiguous, because what are we recovering or reconstructing or rebuilding? Because most of the institutions, they already have like the long-term traumas or the ones that they inherited from the Soviet times. So do we want to recover them, or do we now have the chance on the occupied territories to start something new, for example, in the sphere of the city building, like to allow ourselves experimenting? But we will physically not have time, because I suspect that you have questions and reflections on what we have already articulated, as the number of questions and issues has been communicated. I owed it to that part, but I see that they're silent now. Okay, then you please. You were first. The first row. Netova Marina, Anti-Crisis Media Center in Kramatorsk. I think that decentralization must end and achieve its logical result, and to make the mandatory amendments to the legislation. So sorry, but me as the taxpayer, I would be honest with you. We have very many state officials on different levels, the local self-government, regional level, national level, different ministries. We don't have a sufficient quantity of people to pay you salaries. So sorry for this remark, but honestly, you're strangling us. When you say that we need to help people return, but we do not want to work for state officials. Let's make actually decentralization bring us the results, right? Let's eliminate some of the nucleus, and then you will have this wonderful super reserve, a super cool specialists, and we will give the best ones to the ministry, because they also have lack of personnel, and super cool will be in the local self-government bodies, where at the moment they don't even have they lack 70% of the personnel on the level of the local self-government. If you all are so great, yes. You used to work as the city mayor, right? Yes, as of 2020. Okay, but somehow you didn't go there. Will you go back to work to the local self-government body? Yes, okay. So then you will be the super great specialist. This is my big pain issue, that the state officials, we are working and working. It seems like we work for 26 hours. I'm the representative of the civil organization, and here the citizens who represent the public sector, there are also many. We all work for the victory and so on, but officials, it's not about, I'm not talking to you directly, but state officials is the pain for everyone. It's just the scream of the soul. So this is the risk we talked about, that there is a danger of generalizing all officials, like all armed forces of Ukraine, all military. No. I have another question then. Will you be ready to join the state authorities to work there? Yes, I was invited. Well, then it would be wonderful. But you were offered, but you didn't go. Right, yes, because I'm an activist and I can do a lot more on my front. Thank you, madam. I have been the public activist as of 18 years old. When the occupation of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea occurred, I responded during day one, and on the 27th of February I have established the public organization who was helping the IDPs, including from the Donetsk and Luhansk region. But it happened the way it happened. Unfortunately, as of 2014, we did not have any deoccupation, reintegration strategies in place. Very many bills were not adopted. The first bill about IDPs was prepared in my office in Bessarabska Square of Kyiv city. And a number of other laws and projects was prepared also in my office together with other CSOs. But unfortunately, for a long period of time, many of those were not adopted. So then I took another responsibility and I said, okay, then I will go to the state authorities and I will from the inside try to do the things that I failed to do in the public sector. I do not get a high salary. I get around 40,000 hryvnias. I know that my comrades, my friends from the public sector get much higher salaries. And they work with a smaller responsibility they hold. So, dear friends, let's respect each other. Let's refuse different types of generalization. When you responded to the questions of the collective irresponsibility that Oleksiy suggested about the people's deputies, Oleksandr, sorry, let me finish. You mentioned the democracy tool. But what you're talking about is not about democracy, I beg your pardon. Democracy, it's respect for each other. Democracy is respect, yes, for each other. And your generalization, it's not about responsibility. I'm so sorry. You are quite right. I made an example of me also holding responsibility as the representative of the CSO, and then of other type of responsibility when I have become the civil servant. So when we see and hear such generalizations, they do not facilitate. Why? Because they do not add to the support of the state. You see? And undermining the state institutions during the war, that's a very bad thing. So don't generalize. Okay, it's very difficult to have a common, understanding in the discussion because we're not looking for the. So sorry. I would like to respond. Are there civil servants at all? Please raise your hands. Civil servants, raise your hands. We do have civil servants. Thank you so much. And who is from local self-governments? Military administrations, okay. I want to say that both civil servants and the servants of the local self-governments are also taxpayers. And why does it make you laugh? We have talked about dignity, respect of each other. I have the army of 160,000 of civil servants, and they decrease. And now 39,000 of civil servants, men, will be in the front line. We can lose these people now, and women will only work. Will you again shout that we are tired of working for you? They're also fulfilling their duty, and they treat responsibly their duties and their functions. They also have children. I'm a mother of 2 children. I'm a grandmother of 2 grandchildren. I know what it is. I had a chance to leave, not once. I had many offers, but I am responsible for what I do where I am in my position. I will defend the interests of the civil servants in any way. And we cannot say right now that all state officials are not dignified or villains. Who do you think you are? Are you the best ones or the super? I refer myself to the public that can do more than officials. Please respect the civil servants who bear their responsibility in front of the citizens of Ukraine. Thank you so much. And I think that's where we'll have the another question. Good day. I will speak up Barbash Vitaly, head of the Avdiivka Civil Military Administration. About democracy, a few remarks and my thoughts. Democracy, we will have democracy, but after victory and not right away. That's what I think. Because non-democracy allowed our heroic city to hold on for 2 years. Because there was interaction of the military administration of all military bodies in the places. I support the words of Alexander Mykolaievich. If there were people deputies there, I guess Avdiivka would have fallen very fast. Because 2 minutes and the decision is there. That's why Avdiivka held on. And I think democracy will return there. On account of democracy, one more thing. By the way, Avdiivka developed even before the full-scale invasion, and then it also had the civil military administration, then the military administration, and the city was developing quite fast. And only because there was the team who also bore the responsibility in relation to corruption risks. And I told everyone, to the prosecutor, to the security service, I told them, please sit together with me and check. All the decisions that I have signed, they are in line. And the majority of my colleagues also behave in this way. And that's the way it's supposed to be during the martial law. This is my personal opinion. I also wanted to say that there is an unregulated question on the status of the employees of the military administrations and the civil military administrations. And there is a non-regulated question of the salary of the heads of military administrations, the military ones, those who are the military servants. And if to speak about money, yes, I am a taxpayer. And my salary is 25,000 hryvnias, and before New Year I had 16,000. It's just for your understanding. Thank you. Thank you. This was the remark, and we have one more question. Good day, dear all. I represent the Science, National Academy of the Sciences. Please introduce yourself. Zablotska Inna Volodymyrivna, Institute for Economic Legal Development, Luhansk Department, and I should say that I work both with civil servants and with the public organizations and communities and so on. And I should say that I would like to take a bow in front of the civil servants, because I think that, sorry for such a comparison, but these are girls and boys to be beaten up. Whatever they do, how they do it, where they do it, it's all wrong, you know, because they didn't say something right, they didn't turn right. I understand that we're all different, and I also know the representatives of the public who become part of some process only in the professional field. But I know that there are others. That's why, please, let's differentiate and say that there are specific persons, names, and maybe representatives. So do not, you know, apply this to all and say that they do nothing. No. I think that if you work there and you're good at it, then yes, I do take a bow before you, because there are many scientific researches that we make, and we see the differences that occur on different territories where the authorities work properly and where the public works properly and so on. Thank you. thank Mr. Artem. It reminds me the civil servant, the public sector, the veterans, not civil servants. Dear all, we all forgot 2014 somehow. West, East, please be over with it. Stop using these differentiations. We didn't win the war yet to have these arguments. Honestly, there is the guilty, there is the responsible, there is the law enforcement agency. If there is the guilty activist, the law enforcement agency is to work with them. And now you will say that the law enforcement agency doesn't work properly, you know, because there is never an ending to this. Okay, thank you. I see. I do have a hope when looking at this sector, and they are silenced, the local self-government and the civil servants. So we have, oh, okay, this sector raised their hand first. Hello, Serhiy Karelin. I represent the Academy of Electronic Governance. But all these 10 years, as a part of this audience, I was the representative of the internally displaced persons, and I fought for the rights of the internally displaced persons. I want to thank to each and everyone civil servant who supported us during all this time and who has worked trying to help us. That's number one. Second, we do not understand where we are. We may lose the entire civil service potential because of the reduction of civil servants and because of their mobilization. To raise the civil servant, that's traditionally at least 2 higher educations. That's being professional, that it takes at least 10 or 15 years to bring up or, you know, to educate the civil servant. And this contribution can never be returned. That's what we need to retain. And frankly speaking, I want to speak now to the higher top management that we are to eliminate this norm, that the person will serve for the good of the people. Madam Tamila, I would like to remind you that the state program, the state reintegration program, was established in 2015 and adopted by the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. Yes, for IDPs. And it was pretty good. But unfortunately, the previous government didn't manage to finance it, so that we began this movement as of then. As for the recovery of the eastern regions, I would treat this matter very carefully. But as for the democracy, I would like to give an example. Severodonetsk in city, when they have established that the civil military administration, the democracy became more active there when the local self-government was out. And when we got the public budget and the display of the public, it was a lot higher than any other city of Ukraine. So this is the movement that must be developed further on. Even if the military civil administration is developed, the tools of democracy must be still in place where it's possible. We understand the front line is the front line, and the cities that are shelled, they need to defend, of course. But where possible, this must be preserved, because this will be a problem for our future if we don't do this, because then we wouldn't be any different from the orgs. Thank you. We are running out of time. As far as I understand, you will have a lot to talk about during lunch. But I would like to remind you that without public associations, we won't have a healthy society. Without civil servants, we will not have a healthy state, and both of them are part of the armed forces of Ukraine. And those who are not part of the armed forces of Ukraine, they make donations. So each of you, please make the donation at least of 50 hryvnias, and then with clear conscience we can continue in the informal lunch environment. Thank you so much. We will continue in 1 hour. Irina has an announcement to make.